What's up, everybody? It's your host, the American Viking, and welcome to the second episode of the American Viking Studios podcast. I know last week I ended up doing a little bit of an introduction to the channel, along with an attempt at a very poorly researched Reddit article thing. It was a mess. Anyway, so on the second episode here of the podcast, I've decided I'm going to give you guys a brief history of what's gotten me here specifically and how that's affected me and things of that nature. A kind of an introduction to who is your host. Maybe that's what I'll call this one. Anyway, so I'm not going to give you a full in-depth review of my childhood and things of that nature. That's not what this is going to be. So about a year ago, actually probably not, in about April of this year. Well, no, okay, we'll start a little bit further back than that. So about a year ago is accurate. From time of posting, I was working at a fairly good job in the state and city of DFW, Texas, greater area there. Lived in a place called Arlington, and I was working for this company, and I had an opportunity to take a promotion, but with that promotion, it required me to move to a different city, San Antonio, Texas, which is about 4 hours south and I believe to the east of DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth. Now, at the time, I was making just below $60,000 a year. This is previous to promotion, okay? At the time, I was making just below $60,000 a year, like very much just below. Probably around 58, maybe 57.5, somewhere around there. And I was hourly. Did a lot of traveling and stuff of that nature. So that means that my total annual income was actually over $60,000 a year because of per diem, travel expenses, overtime, things of that nature. Very easily making over $60,000 a year. When I was offered this promotion, it came with a salary. And I don't know if my expectations were wrong or too high for what this position was supposed to grant me in terms of financial security, but the income that they offered me was $60,000 as a salary for what could be perceived as a fairly big jump in terms of leadership and responsibility aspects. Not to mention the personal, and that's all professional related, so not to mention the personal approach, which is I was moving to an entirely new city, specifically for this promotion, we had no base set in that area. I was the plant to go to that area, start this new office, start drumming up contracts and things of that nature, training all the new employees, going through the hiring process, all of that was set very squarely on my shoulders. For them to then essentially give me a non-existent raise. And if you look at it from my point of view, actually cut my ability to make income because any hours I work over 40 are now unpaid because I'm salaried. So I had already agreed to do this, so unfortunately I couldn't, when we were in well, there wasn't much negotiation, but when we were in the negotiation phase about the pay, I had already agreed to make this change. So, and I had 45 days, I believe, to make the move. This kind of came as a last-minute opportunity for me, and my lease was coming up to end at the apartment I was in January, and they wanted me to move at the end of my lease. And it was middle of November, late November, when all of this happened. So I had about 30 or 45 days to try to find an apartment and get that move ready to go. Well, anyway, we agreed that I would go down there, and one of the stipulations was that after certain periods of time and certain markers that I had met in terms of team size and contract size and things like that, my salary would increase based on those markers. For the future of this conversation, one of the big ones is once I had 2 new personnel hired and efficiently trained, I would get an additional, I believe it was $2,000 or $4,000 added to my salary permanently. That was not to be, taken back if we lost team size or whatever. And then another $2,000 or $4,000 added when one of them was trained to be a proficient team lead. Okay. So with that in mind, I went ahead and said, okay, well, I can make this work. I've trained tons of people at this point. I've got that in the bag. So, I should get an extra $2,000 pretty soon, all things considered. So, my partner and I went ahead and decided that, yes, let's go ahead and make this move. Now, I was still working full-time and traveling quite often. So I was not afforded the opportunity to drive down to San Antonio and look at apartments or walk things through. We were having to do this entire moving process into a new city essentially online and virtually. Because of that, we signed a lease for an apartment that was awful. Just awful. To the tune of we did not have air conditioning in our apartment for essentially 5 out of the 6 months that we lived there. Okay. So, personally, this was a terrible move. Not familiar with the city. I'm not a huge fan of San Antonio for a plethora of reasons. And it may have just been we started really negatively with the move to San Antonio and all of the stuff happening just directly with my relationship with our leasing office and that apartment complex and things of that nature. And so every other little thing that I could find to be negative about San Antonio just, again, piled up on top of that. That's entirely possible. San Antonio may be a great place for tons of people. It is, otherwise it wouldn't be such a large city. But for me, it was just a miserable experience from onset to the end of it. So we moved down there. My folks were kind enough to drive from Alabama to help us move down there. So the day of the move, just to give you an insight, the day of the move, my partner and I started like 6 or 7 in the morning packing stuff up. Now, this is also, just for reference, this is also when I had my own personal gym. I had a storage unit that was about 250 square feet that I had all of my own gym equipment in, and that was coming with us. Because I was told, again, that we were going to be purchasing a shop in San Antonio and that I was allowed permission to put all of my gym equipment in there to save myself a little bit of money on a storage unit, but still have a place I could access at any time of the day I chose to go work out. So we started packing that stuff up, and we went there first because that's all the heaviest stuff and all that. And I didn't necessarily want to make my folks carry 45-pound plates and bars and all kinds of stuff into this giant box truck that we had. So we spend the entire day loading up my, at the time, 1-bedroom apartment to move down to San Antonio. And we get on the road probably around 6 or 7 o'clock at night because we didn't make it to San Antonio till 9 or 10. It's about a 4-hour drive. We get there, unlock the door, turn the lights on. The apartment's a mess. There's paint all over the floors. It's dirty, hasn't been cleaned. The kitchen was okay, I'll admit. But the floors hadn't been cleaned. The walls hadn't been cleaned. There was fresh paint or some sort of sealant or something in the tub to where none of us could shower. Okay? We'd been packing and driving for 14 hours, 15 hours, something like that, and none of us could shower at the apartment because the tub was the shower was unusable. and walk in, and the AC's at like, 78, 79 degrees or something like that. So I'm like, okay, I was extremely irritated. I was like, okay, we're just going to go to a hotel, and we'll worry about this tomorrow. So I turned on the AC because I thought to myself, okay, at bare minimum, when we get here, it'll be 70, 68 degrees, something like that. I always set my AC to 68. Small little factoid about me. So at least we'll be cool as we have to move tomorrow. So we go to the hotels. My folks ended up staying in a different hotel than we did because they have rewards programs and stuff like that. And anyway, next morning we get up, sore as all get out, right? We've been moving just heavy stuff for the entire day. And here we are having to do it again. And come back to the apartment. Well, now it's daylight. It's like 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And it's daylight. And the apartment looks worse than it did, right, in the artificial light first time seeing it. And the air conditioner is at 82 degrees. So we know the AC doesn't work because the apartment's been closed, all the windows have been closed, and the AC's been running all night. So we already know the AC doesn't work. And it's, I think it's a Sunday because I think that I moved on a weekend. Like I packed everything up on a Saturday, unpacked everything on a Sunday, and then went back to work on Monday. I don't recommend that, by the way. Just tips and tricks for you guys who are moving out there. And so we already know the AC doesn't work, but it's a Sunday. So the office is closed, so we can't go in there and yell at them or anything like that. So we're like, okay, well, we got to get all this stuff out of the U-Haul because I got to turn in the U-Haul at the end of the day today. And we had to spend the first 2 or 3 hours of our day cleaning just so that we were comfortable moving stuff into that apartment. I, took pictures of everything, all this stuff. But it was awful. It was miserable. And we continued to have problems with that apartment up until we moved out. We went through 2 different management companies in the 6 months that we were there. So when we signed the lease, there was a different management company. Then there was a different management company. Then there was, I'm sorry, not management company. Let me rephrase that. There was one management company with one team, and then the team changed, and then there was a whole new company that came in and bought the whole property out. Those people that came in and bought the property out fixed a lot of stuff. They're the ones that finally came and replaced our entire AC unit after trying to fix it 2 separate times. So, they were trying to do the right thing. But when they came in was on the tail end of our stay in San Antonio, so it just, we didn't want to stick it out. Now, that's all kind of the personal stuff going on. Professionally, I moved and was doing my job and all this other stuff, and was doing a great job. The customers that I worked with had nothing but positive things to say about me. They continued to compliment my professionalism, my knowledge in the area, all of these things. And all of that stuff would work its way back up the food chain. And I don't know, by probably January, February, March, or March, somewhere around that area, I had already trained 2 guys that could work completely independently, and had spoken to my supervisors about the raise, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we'll do that. Sure, yeah, no, you're right. We need to take care of that. Just keep training all this other stuff. You know what? Pick one of them out. See if they're ready to be a team lead." And before I left, the guy I left another dude in charge down there, and yeah, clearly he was a proficient team lead because he as soon as I left, he was running the operation in my absence. And so, but again, didn't see a dollar out of the company for either one of those markers that they put in place. I didn't put these in place. I didn't suggest them. This was entirely my company's decision. And again, yeah, they just continued to kind of, at least it felt like to me, they continued to just kind of thumb their nose at me and be like, yeah, no, we know you're going to do the work. We know you're going to do the work. It doesn't matter if we pay you or not. So you moved to an entirely new city for this, rather, which was a miserable experience. Have been dealing with one of the worst living situations that I've had to deal with in recent history just to do this job, and making less money doing it than I was in a city that I'm not comfortable in without the same equipment. Because, again, I don't have a shop. They didn't have a shop down there ready for me. So I was having to go out and try to find a shop. And all of this is happening when one very key element was going on. Our company was being bought out. And they lied to us about it more than once. They said that this was a merger, that an investment company was dumping money into us so that we could expand more rapidly for a percentage of ownership, which is how business is done. There's nothing wrong with that. The way it was phrased to all of us on the labor level, the people out in the field doing the work, is that they were just going to dump, I couldn't give you a number, but let's say $10 million into the company for a percentage of ownership so that we could buy more trucks, buy more shops, and expand more rapidly so that we could increase our own profitability at a very rapid pace and therefore increase the investment company's profitability. And there was a lot of good things that were supposed to happen with this because this investment company already had a relationship with another company that did almost exactly what we did. Slightly different, but a lot of the fundamentals are the same, which means our materials could get cut drastically because we could be ordering as a unit as opposed to two individual companies. So there were a lot of good things that could come from this. But what all of us on the labor level started to see is that everything that we understood about how the company worked started coming to a grinding halt. And it was very, very visible from the onset. All of this kind of began happening when I made the move to San Antonio. So again, we've got this giant event and then a snowball effect from here. So the money ends up just getting tied up. While all of this is happening, the investment firm wants to see the profitability numbers, the expense numbers, all of this stuff, which, again, just good business practice. But in order for all that to happen, they really restricted our ability to purchase the way that we were used to in terms of parts, materials, everything, which made it very difficult for us to keep up the very positive interaction we have with almost all of our customers. The biggest change that happened is we were a customer-driven company. Our superiors would shell out whatever money we believed was necessary to ensure that our customers were happy because they were paying a very premium price for our services. We weren't a cheap company, but because we weren't a cheap company, we came with certain standards and procedures and promises that you didn't get anywhere else. What ended up happening was that when this investment firm came in, our focus started shifting from customer focus to bottom line focus, which for an investment company makes sense because they don't give a crap about customers. They give a crap about a return on their investment. Now, here's the biggest piece of information. I don't know how much money came in, but what I do know is they bought 51% controlling interest in the company, which meant that what we were told about things getting better and us having more ability to grow and there being more opportunity for advancement and all of these things was in complete and utter distruth. Because they had no say over how anything was done anymore. Everything began to change. From the way we were treating our customers to the way we were doing our reporting, everything began to change. And we just ended up becoming more and more like this other company that already existed in a lot of ways. To the point where there were quite a few people in our company that were worried that hourly wages and salaries were going to get cut because we were getting paid significantly more than this now partner company. To the point where they were we were a multi-state company. Some states do not require you as a business to offer sick pay. And so they were just as a way to cut back on some of the expenditures, they were threatening to take away sick pay for all of the employees that had signed contracts that say you're authorized, I think it was 24 hours a year of sick pay, which isn't a lot, all things considered. But anyway, it began to go downhill very quickly, very rapidly, and you pile that on with all of the pay issues that I was having, and the respect issues, and the fact that I started to feel like I was being very much undervalued in my field, that I just didn't want to do it anymore. I had no interest in working for that company. I had no interest in working for the investment company. Had it stayed the original leadership in the original company that I signed on with, it might have been a different story. But I had no interest in working for that investment company. They fired quite a few of our upper management simply for disagreeing with how we wanted to do things. One of the ones that made it through the ranks is our CFO, our used to be CFO. They all had a big sit down, and the investment company was coming in and starting to lay out all of these changes that they were going to make. Keep in mind, this is not really a discussion at this point. This is this company informing my company of how they're going to be doing things. And the reason that this investment company purchased us was because they couldn't get into our businesses where we already had stand-up shops, where we had offices and business centers and already had a solid amount of work. This company couldn't break in. They didn't want to deal with anybody else except for our company. Our company's name meant something. So the only way they could be competitive with us in fields we were already working was to purchase our company. Well, at this meeting when they were laying out all of these changes that were going to happen, our CFO, who I appreciate for saying this, given his title, and I don't even know how much money he would have been making at the time, pretty much put his foot down and said, "Why are you guys trying to change anything when the reason you had to purchase our company is because you couldn't compete with us?" Well, they didn't like that and asked him to no longer be a part of the team. And that, of course, makes it down the ranks. There's no way that that doesn't, right? So that sets the tone for this entire takeover at this point. So all of these things all happening at the same time. I didn't want to work for this company anymore, so I quit. I said, I'm out. And that was in April of 22, depending on when you're watching this video, because some of you may be watching this in 2 or 3 years, who knows. That was in April of 2022. And that probably, I have a very supportive partner, and she's been a fantastic portion of my success. But that probably wasn't the best decision, all things considered. I didn't quit with a backup plan. I quit because I hated just about every portion of my life at that moment and wanted it to change. I hated every part about my life at that moment and wanted it to change. I hated where I was. I hated who I was working for. All these. I honestly, there were a couple people that I really hated working with as well. I was like, I need to be done with this. I'm out. So after that, just kind of bounced around from thing to thing just to make some income and stuff like that. And then come about the June time period, during all of this, my parents lived in Alabama full-time, taking care of both sets, realistically, of my grandparents. Well, in about June and July, my mother asked me, essentially, if I would be willing to move out to the state with them, because my mom's parents live up on a mountaintop and have a very old house that is in pretty awful condition, all things considered, sorry. And wanted to see if I'd be willing to move up to that house and start working on it and fixing it. And I was like, this is great. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go up there and be close to family. Let's realign what's important. Because all I'd been doing was chasing the number, chasing the, I need to make 60 grand a year. I need to make 80 grand a year, or whatever it was. I know in a previous video that I posted, I said that I'd hit a couple markers that could be considered successful. Being paid a $60,000 salary a year could be one of those markers. So I essentially told my apartment complex that I wasn't going to pay out the rest of my lease, that I wanted to be let out of my lease because of all of the terrible conditions that I've been dealing with in my apartment. No AC, never be having things fixed, outlets, lights, appliances not working consistently, all of these things. And they were like, okay, you know what? We understand. And this was the new management company, so they aren't necessarily responsible for how previous management and teams had treated us as tenants, but because it's their property, they also inherited the problems. So we came to an agreement with them that we would move out at the end of July and that we weren't going to be charged anything after that point. Like no broken lease on my record or things of that nature, right? We obviously had to pay rent, but none of the stuff that normally comes with getting out of your lease early. So we decided we were going to make the move to Alabama. Now, originally we were supposed to go stay in that house on the mountain. Well, there are some heavily religious people up on that mountaintop, and my partner and I are not married. This presented a huge problem for them. Keep in mind, this came about after we'd already made the decision to move. So, and I do my best to be a good person and a good son. It's not always a success, but I do my best. And I told my mom I wasn't willing to be the wedge between her and other family members over my life's choices. So we made the decision not to move into that house on a mountaintop and to stay with my folks for a little while and then find our own apartment, which is what we did. Now, when I moved here because I thought I had a job. And that fell through in fantastic fashion. Found another job. Really enjoyed that job. I was working in quality assurance. So I was working in manufacturing, quality assurance. So I got to walk through, inspect, kind of randomly, all this other stuff. I worked with a great team. I really enjoyed it. What I did not know is Alabama has labor laws that are designed for the employers and for no one else. There's nothing to protect you as an employee out here in Alabama. So one day they called me to the office and fired me and gave me no reason why. Literally none. Their reason, quote, "You're just not a good fit for our team." When I went and told my team that I was working with that I'd been asked to leave, they were all visibly shocked at what might have happened. So no one knew. No one was prepared. Who knows what the reason was? That is the only job I have ever been fired from. And that took a toll on me more than I really care to express. So, again, was just trying to find jobs at that point because we needed to make money. So, again, kind of found a job, worked for a couple of them were temp jobs just because, again, I needed an income to come in. But temp jobs don't last, so it was one thing after another. Until finally, my partner found a job that suits her fantastically, and she makes enough of an income to pay all of our necessities. So we sat down and had a conversation between us and then also with my folks about wanting to pursue this full-time with the caveat of also being available to assist in the care of my grandparents if and when that day comes. And I've played video games and stuff like that for a long time, since our entire relationship. And she has always told me, you should do it. You should do it. She's always said I should stream. I don't think I'm built to be a streamer. You guys, if you're any streamers out there watching this or potential streamers out there watching this, you guys have some crazy work ethic and some insane willpower. Kudos to you, because I don't think I've got it. But she's always said I should do something like this. So when we sat down and talked about it, not only was she supportive, she was thrilled that I was even considering doing this as a profession. So, and I told my folks, I said, this is something I'm passionate about. This is something I do want to do. If I don't take this opportunity, I'll kick myself for it. If I don't try, I failed at everything else over the past year. So if I don't fail at myself, or if I'm going to fail at something else, I might as well fail doing something I want to do for me. So that brings us to essentially where we are now, where you guys are now seeing me sit in front of my camera, post 2 videos a day, and maybe even watching me work out on Instagram. And hopefully this works. Hopefully in a year, 2 years, 3 years, however long it takes, something kicks off, something catches you guys' attention, and I get to bring my dreams into my reality. So there's your brief history of what got me here in front of this camera talking to you guys as a profession. It's been a long journey, and I'm hoping I didn't start too late, but better late than never, as they say. And I really hope you guys enjoy the content, because I want to keep doing it. I want this to be enough that I get to invest more time, more money, more of myself into this, so that you guys can continue to appreciate whatever content it is that I'm making. And we get to take this journey together. So yeah, I think that's about it today. This podcast, way better in my opinion than the first one. I apologize. I'm still figuring it out. We're figuring it out together. So hopefully we'll have more of these long form type of videos. And maybe this is my ability to kind of let you guys into my life outside of the other stuff that I'm doing, whether it be Pokemon video games or gym and health stuff. Maybe this is an opportunity for me to let you guys into some of the other stuff that goes on and keep you in the loop with just what makes me me. So that's it for today. As always, I'm your host, the American Viking, and tune in next week for another podcast episode, or just subscribe, like, comment, and see what else is coming to the channel. Thank you guys for watching, and have a great day.